So we're going to talk about what life was like under Chinese communism, under Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and up till today, how communist rule has affected China. So, as we remember, after the Chinese Civil War, the communists take control, and they are led by Mao Zedong. With China under communism, Mao Zedong is going to focus on making it a full communist nation, not unlike what Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin did in the Soviet Union. Similar to them, Mao is a totalitarian leader with total and complete control over his country. One of the first programs Mao makes, and there are two famous programs of his, there is the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. Under the Great Leap Forward, this is Mao's economic plan. The Great Leap Forward is very similar to Stalin's 5-year plans. Mao's goal was to boost or increase the agricultural and industrial production of China. Today, it is seen as a failure because it did not work. Most of the Great Leap Forward resulted in death, it resulted in famine. And this was not a forced famine like in Ukraine, but it still was man-made because of Mao's programs. So Mao is responsible for many deaths due to the famines during the Great Leap Forward. In order to boost industrial production, you see this picture of what looks like these little mounds. Those are actually ovens for melting metal, because Mao encouraged people to take whatever metal they could find, doorknobs, spoons, forks, and melt them so you can make more metal for China as well. So that was his plan, to boost industrial and agricultural production. He also forced people to live on communes, which we mentioned before. So most of the peasant classes lived together on these communes, where they worked and farmed together for the betterment of China, which, as you can see, resulted in millions of deaths. So after the failure of the Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong launches a cultural revolution. Mao's cultural revolution is an attempt to strengthen his rule in China. So what Mao is going to do is he's going to purge his enemies like Stalin did. He's going to kill anybody he didn't like. He's going to force the youth to learn his ways and rebel against their elders. He's going to make the youth carry around these little red books, which are sayings of how great Mao is. It says, I'm Mao, I'm great, blah, 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 blah. He's going to encourage the students to tell on their parents and their teachers if they're teaching anti-Mao ideas. And really, the effect of this is he's going to minimize the legacy of China's artistic legacy and artistic achievements, because many poets, many intelligent intellectuals are punished during this time. They're either executed or jailed, or worse, tortured. So Mao Zedong has an interesting legacy in China. Yes, he did create China as a communist nation and is the father of that country. However, economically, Mao did not do much to help the Chinese economy. So when Mao dies in the 1970s, they're going to look for a new leader to take control. That man is going to be Deng Xiaoping, this guy over here. And if we look at the picture of this graph, we see a big difference in the economy of China between Mao and Deng. So Deng Xiaoping is going to launch reforms. You notice the effects of these reforms are still felt today as China becomes a powerful economy that moves a little bit away from communism economically, but is still totalitarian today. And we know that China still has a large influence today. In fact, most of the stuff you have today are made in China. For example, these sunglasses I have, made in China. This hat I bought in America, made in China. This hat I bought in South Africa, made in China. So China makes products today and has an influence on the world. So how did Deng Xiaoping make China a strong economy today? Well, he made it a socialist market economy. This is a mix of communism and capitalism. So he abolished those communes. He allowed people to live wherever they wanted. He allowed farmers to farm their own farms and decide what they wanted to grow. Isn't that amazing? You could decide if you wanted to grow apples, you can grow apples. If you want to grow beans, you can grow beans or rice. So he allowed them to make their own decisions, their own economic decisions, which is a part of capitalism. He also allowed people to sell the goods they produce at local markets, and he opened up China to foreign trade, which is why I have two hats from different parts of the world made in China, and sunglasses made in China. So today, the Chinese economy, because of Deng, has had foreign investment. You can go to China and have an American company, McDonald's. You can have Starbucks, and you can see beautiful city landscapes like this, where China is becoming this rapidly growing economic power. So we have a name for Deng's reforms in China, and they're called the Four Modernizations. He used government planning, communism, and the market economy, capitalism, to modernize China. He modernized agriculture, industry, science and technology, and the military. Four modernizations to make China a strong country. In fact, many argue that the economy of China is stronger than that of the United States today. Even under Deng Xiaoping, another major important goal of his reforms is improving relations with the West, with Europe, and the United States. So Deng actually takes a tour to the United States and meets the president and speaks to the American people. Even though Deng created many economic reforms, he did not exactly give political freedom. So one of the most famous incidents of Deng Xiaoping's leadership was the Tiananmen Square protest. So in April of 1989, these students gathered in Tiananmen Square. China had been going under economic reforms, so students decided to protest for more democracy. Surprise, surprise, Deng Xiaoping does not want to give more democracy in China. So on May 20th, he declares martial law, where he sends in the army to stop the protesters. And beginning on June 4th, in China, it's called the June 4th incident, the government uses the army and begins to execute and kill protesters. And a man named the Tank Man becomes famous because this is happening on TV, live, in the 1980s, and people from around the world are watching as this one man stands in front of a line of tanks going to run over and kill the protesters in Tiananmen Square. This incident caused China to look bad in the eyes of foreign powers like the United States and Europe. People were realizing the human rights violations of the country as well. So what we learned from Deng Xiaoping, and this is still relevant today, is that China would change economically. China would change to make themselves an economic power, but they would not give more political rights. And that still affects China today. We see that China is still controversial today because of their stance on human rights. In China, censorship is high. You cannot go on any internet website or social media that you want to. You cannot criticize your government on social media. It is illegal and you could be arrested or jailed. Celebrities in China have, quote-unquote, disappeared for speaking out against the government. And they've also had a one-child policy for years where many children were adopted in order to control the population. And in some areas, young children were also killed because you could only have one child, one female child. Also in China, aside from other relevant news, President Xi Jinping has been in the news because of his stance on Hong Kong, which was a British territory until 1997 and was supposed to be given more freedom when it became part of China, but recently China has tried to restrict the freedoms of people living in Hong Kong. So China still remains a powerful country today, but also a very controversial one. So some things to think about as we look through the Chinese Communist Revolution. We really want to think, one, How did the Chinese Communist Revolution happen? Who supported the Chinese Communist Revolution? And why were the communists able to win? 2, we also want to think about how communist rule has affected China. So we want to think about things like Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward and how it affected China, his Cultural Revolution and how it affected China. We also want to think about the effect Deng Xiaoping had on China and its economy today. And finally, we want to think of China's human rights record today and why China is such a controversial country in modern times. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Good luck with your assignments this week, and I'll talk to you next week.